Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be looking at one of the most famous Italian novels, if not the most, The Leopard, or Il Gattopardo, by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. So this is a slow and slightly more reflective novel, but it's really brimming with so much profundity and a real tragic sense of fatalism. What's more, from a literary perspective, it's astoundingly rich and really descriptive in the way it describes the beautiful Sicilian country. As usual, we'll start by looking at the narrative of the book, what actually happened, and then we'll move on to some crucial themes, the messages that Lampedusa is trying to convey. Throughout, we'll also be skimming over some key quotes that by the end you guys should have a really clear idea of what the book's about and some of its key ideas. So I guess as a summary in a few words, the book is about the end of the old elite in Sicily and Italy and the arrival of the new, modern, democratic Italian Republic. More specifically, it deals with the Sicilian aristocracy and how they interpret the weight of the political and economic change from their very particular worldview. So this is especially important as, being detached from mainland Italy and possessing such a radically different history and culture, the notion of Sicily's joining was really fraught with tension. The novel, therefore, to no surprise, is set in the 1860s, and this is really the culmination of the Italian Risorgimento, or the unification. The date with which the book actually starts is a really important moment in Sicilian history, as this was when Garibaldi came with the 1,000 and landed at Marsala on Sicily's western coast, all in an effort to absorb the Bourbon kingdom of the two Sicilies. Before we move on to the actual text, however, it's important to discuss the contemporary relevance of the book. Lampedusa wrote this in the 1950s, however, and this was really when memories of the Allied invasion and the destruction of great parts of Sicily were still really fresh in memory. Indeed, the Lampedusa Palace, for Tomasi was descended from a line of minor princes, was bombed and pillaged. Allegedly, after this, Tomasi sank into some sort of depression, and this is where he wrote the book, which was tragically not published until after his death. The book, therefore, in many ways is kind of a tender reflection on a lost Sicily. The protagonist for this piece is the ursine and also slightly enigmatic Don Fabrizio, who is the Prince of Salina. He's a member of said aristocracy and certainly feels the weight of change to which he feels almost powerless. He's narcissistic, autocratic, quick-tempered. He has little love for his dutiful wife, Maria, who he shuns quite often in favour of some woman from the town or the bordello. But he's also tender, melancholy, and above all else, would you believe, he's an amateur astrologer. And in fact, this is what Lampedusa does to give us real characters. These characters are exceedingly real in the sense that they have both pleasant characteristics and things that we like about them and can empathise, but also their serious flaws, and that's what human beings are at the end of the day. So let's get on to the narrative. The book begins detailing the Salina family's move from the centre to their semi-feudal estate in Donofulgata, presumably to avoid Garibaldi and the change that's happening. But more specifically, it starts with Don Fabrizio strolling in his garden and discovering an injured Neapolitan soldier who's crawled all his way up to Fabrizio's lemon grove to die. This is evidently a device of tragic foreboding. It's depicting incoming change posing itself on Fabrizio's surroundings. This certainly has an effect on Fabrizio, who in the end decides to cover up the problem and go to a local bordello to forget his problems, a local brothel. It's worth noting that the book is peppered with this sort of existential and really fatalist anguish. Don Fabrizio knows that this change is coming, a change in which even his nephew is participating. His nephew joins the army, and he knows that his life is somewhat incompatible with this new world that's arriving. And indeed, the book is really a treatise on his coming to terms with this change, his belief that what is to come is necessary and, above all, inevitable. In fact, the most famous quote from this book is this quote: "If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change." Subsequently, we're introduced to certain other personages, such as the nephew, the impetuous but slightly charming Tancredi, and it becomes clear that Fabrizio wishes for his daughter, Concetta, to be courted by him. But instead he falls hopelessly for this girl Angelica, who's the daughter of his rival, Don Calogero. Later in the novel, Lampedusa notes quite extensively about the blossoming love between Tancredi and Angelica as they chase each other through the secret rooms of the Salina Palazzo, and they profess their love for each other. There's so much tension in this section, as there's a really great ambiguity also as to whether they give in to certain urges. This scene is really well juxtaposed with the dealings of Don Fabrizio, who ends up talking to a diplomat about the possibility of becoming a politician in the new republic. but he rejects the offer in the end, deciding that his life is too different. Towards the end of the book, the Salinas go to a ball of a fellow aristocrat, therefore somehow trying to enjoy the last days of their lost nobility, I suppose. And this is where Tancredi and Angelica announce for the first time that they're intended to marry. All the party sort of fawns over Angelica's extreme beauty, but including Don Fabrizio. But on the other hand, he's extremely overwhelmed and distraught about his fading legacy, about the change that's coming, and he has this sort of existential crisis. The book then skips forward to the final days where he's about to pass away of old age, and this is still just as gloomy and just as existentially depressing. But in the final moments, he sees this beautiful angelic woman standing near his bed, and he knows that death in many ways will bring him the sort of peace that his life never could. The final chapter of the book, which it works in some ways I guess as an epilogue, focuses on the daughter Concetta, who watches the old artefacts and relics of the Selina Palazzo being thrown out. One of the occurrences in this final chapter is that she comes to realise that her love with Tancredi might have actually been fulfilled were it not for a misunderstanding related early in the book. In fact, it was her attitude towards one of Tancredi's ill-timed jokes, masquerading as a marriage proposal, which sealed her fate. She reflects really poorly on this and a missed opportunity for joy. The final tableau, which is something that still even sticks with me now, is the scene of Concetta throwing out the rug made of Fabrizio's hound, this big great dog, Bendigo. In fact, the final quote here is equally as memorable. During the flight from the window, its form recomposed itself for an instant. In the air there seemed to be dancing a quadruped with long whiskers, its right foreleg raised in imprecation. Then all found peace in a heap of livid dust. And this is really beautiful symbolism, right, for the end of the Sicilian aristocracy, the Fabrician Leopard household that then, at the end, just becomes dust. One of the key themes here is probably something that you've already picked up, is the idea of change and inertia. The book's overarching theme is really about this, about the progress of the Risorgimento and Don Fabrizio's reluctance and perhaps acceptance of what comes. I mean, Don Fabrizio has no Machiavellian intrigue or strategy to stop any of the incoming change. Rather, his attitude is that, in many ways, we're slaves to all these historical forces. Whether it regard culture or politics or climate even, the best we can do in many ways is to submit to its will and just not swim against its current. In many ways, therefore, he believes the events around him to be somewhat superficial, lacking meaning, and simply masking deeper swathes of power to which he can't affect. It's therefore obvious that Don Fabrizio's reflections in this book are certainly melancholic ones. I mean, he reflects on the end of his way of life and the poor legacy which he'll leave behind. He refuses to fight for his social position, the Sicilian aristocracy, as he knows that it's simply not something worth defending. Rather, he wishes for peace. All the way throughout, Don Fabrizio really encapsulates these changes that are happening to Sicily, and his life and death acts as a symbolism for the decaying of the aristocracy and the old elite, hence the throwing out of Bendigo's rug. The second theme that we guess we can discuss is love. This is a really prevalent theme throughout, and it manifests in different forms, right? You have the balance between the lust, perhaps, of Don Fabrizio whenever he sees Angelica or whenever he visits the local bordello, a sort of a very shallow understanding of love, which is really just an effort to cover over his existential problems. Then secondly, there's the sort of scheming affections of Tancredi, who represents the new republic coming in. He has a genuine love for Angelica, but there's also a slight financial interest behind it. This perhaps reflects the arrival of the new state, which in some ways was slightly rigged. They detailed in the book an occasion whereby they did a ballot as to whether the island wanted to join Italy, and they rigged it in favour of joining. And then finally, infatuation as well, which in some ways can be seen through Tancredi and Angelica, but also Concetta and Tancredi as well. I think the final theme, if you can call this a theme, is the theme of Sicily. Like I said at the beginning, this book is particularly special for its painting a picture of a very particular culture and philosophy. The Leopard in many ways is a treatise on the sensuality, the fatalism and the languor of Sicilian culture. It shows the Sicilian land and peoples as unique even to Italy, and this is gifted to us not only through profoundly reflective passages, but also its highly descriptive writings. I mean, we're told of the aging, the old palazzi, the dryness of the landscape, and we really get to the heart of Don Fabrizio and Lampedusa's love for the island style of life. To conclude, this book isn't some chaotic adventure or an ambitious and sprawling exploration of any one particular theme. Rather, the book is slow and very meditative. In many ways, the book reflects Lampedusa's given philosophy for the Sicilian people. It's a deeply introspective book, laced with beautifully lyrical sections to be savoured. From the description of the opulence of the aristocracy and their large, castle-shaped jellies, to the mesmerising landscape of the Sicilian culture. Beauty is not only to be found, however, in its introspective nature, but also in its literary flair. As we've already noted, Lampedusa has a real talent for symbolism, and he uses these symbols as a means of foreboding the incoming change, the most classic of which being the rug of Bendico. The Leopard in all is a deeply moving book, and we can't help but have tender feelings for this giant of a man who watches his own culture and fortunes wither and die with the times. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and feel free to comment also what books you think I should do in the future. And that's all. Thank you very much.